Hello, my witchy friends. Welcome back to Cat's Tea and Witchcraft. This is the 10th episode, and I'm super excited for this one because it is something that I am very passionate about, but I didn't actually know I was doing it for a very long time. And that is shadow work. Early on in my spiritual journey, mostly in the beginning towards my teenage years, I did not realize what I was doing. I thought it was something that I was doing on my own or something that I thought would benefit me naturally, like journaling, keeping track of my dreams, and just trying to grow and develop myself. And I guess maybe it was just how I was raised. I was always taught that developing yourself and doing martial arts for a really long time when I was younger, you always wanted to become stronger and better emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So it was something that just kind of came natural to me. I'm not perfect at it, but I do find there are periods in my life where it very much does help when I am going in a really weird phase or a downward spiral emotionally or anything else. I try to get back to my shadow work, and it does tend to help. For those who are not familiar with shadow work, I just kind of want to give this early on disclosure. The topics that we will be going over today may mention things that may trigger those who have personal traumas or certain health conditions. If you feel like there are any sensitive topics that may make you feel uncomfortable while listening to this episode, I would suggest maybe skipping this episode completely, or having someone else listen to it before you and let you know if they think it would be okay for you to listen to. Because I don't know what everyone else has gone through, and I know different conversations and different topics may be hard for people to handle at certain points in their life. And before we even get any further from now, I would like to state that anyone who's receiving therapy or medical assistance for mental or physical health, shadow work is not a replacement for those treatments. If you have any questions about shadow work, please talk to your doctors or therapists first to make sure it would be something that would benefit you or you could possibly add to your current treatments and therapy. Some people might not find these disclosures necessary, but since I will be mentioning hard topics, not in depth, but just mentioning them may trigger someone in an uncomfortable way, and I want to just let you guys know ahead of time, just in case you might be in that situation. So before I go over what shadow work is, I'm going to go over what is the shadow. So based off the works of Carl Jung, who I guess worked in the psychology field, is that the shadow is either an unconscious aspect of the personality that the conscious ego does not identify with. The shadow is the unknown side of ourselves to our conscious self, because there's our conscious and then there's our subconscious or unconsciousness or whatever, however you perceive it, I guess. I don't work in the medical field, and I'm not very big into psychology. I don't know very much about it, so I guess it's your internal self that it's kind of deep down within inside you that you don't always pay attention to. So the first bit of that information I pulled off of Wikipedia. I just wanted to have some sources that you guys could look back on if you want a little more in detail about that. So I'm going to keep reading a section on it. The Jungian shadow can include everything outside the light of consciousness and may be positive or negative because one tends to reject or remain ignorant of the least desirable aspect of one's personality. The shadow is largely negative. There are, however, positive aspects that may remain hidden in one's shadow. And in parentheses, it says, especially in people with low self-esteem, anxieties, and false beliefs. So I guess in my mind, the breakdown is your dark side on the inside of you that you tend to push really far and ignore it. And I think that is because most of us, and I know at times I also do, I don't want to pay attention to the things I don't like about myself, my anxieties, things that make me upset, or just traits about myself that I just don't want to pay attention to because it's sometimes easier to ignore those aspects of ourselves. But sometimes those aspects that we hide, it leaks out and it can cause more harm than good. And you might notice some of those leaks if you have an attitude towards situations you shouldn't have an attitude, if you're overly emotional or under emotional, or you have issues in your personal relationships or within your relationship to yourself. And since none of us, not a single human being on this earth is perfect. There's always something about us we could always work on because we are not perfect, and we can always become a better version of ourselves. As we experience different things in our lives, good and bad, we're going to have various traumas or bad experiences that may make us sour at one point or another, and we don't want to let that fester inside of us too long, especially if it's, say, a breakup and of a relationship. You might feel very negative about that person or very sad and still love that person, but you have some sort of hate for them, or you end up not liking yourself because you feel like things are your fault when they might not be. So letting go of those things eventually, or working on them bit by bit and coming to terms with what happened, sometimes can help. Some of these internal wounds might not be 100% healed or fully disappear, but learning to manage them and handle it and grow from it and become a better person. Not that you are already a bad person, but you can always become a stronger version of yourself. Okay, since we pretty much went over what the shadow is, I'm going to actually jump into what shadow work is. So shadow work is allowing yourself to dive into your shadow or subconscious to try to understand your fears, anger, traumas, and other things about yourself that you may be avoiding or blocking some sort of growth, healing, or personal development. Accessing the dark side and trying to understand what makes you tick and why. A way to try to get rid of hidden roadblocks within our own mind that could be preventing us from growing into our best selves. And I've already mentioned that. And as an example of myself, why I do what I do, the reason I pay attention to other people's behavior so closely and build a list of patterns in my head and begin to freak out as soon as I see a pattern change, that's something I find myself doing all the time, and I don't always like it. Because it depends on the situation. Sometimes paying attention to people's actions have saved me from having friends that weren't really good friends, or getting into past relationships that I was able to completely avoid have helped. But a result of me being so intense when it comes to that could be a result of childhood anxiety and the fear of upsetting those who I love, or it's a result of a bad breakup and having ignored red flags in the past and trying to prevent that from happening in the future. And that's probably a combo of all of them together and why I do that, but I understand that there are reasons that I do it, and I could be doing it for different reasons, but learning why I may be doing it can help me calm down a little bit, because sometimes I do go overboard with it, and I definitely know that, because I can make false or wrong judgments about people just because I'm so sure that everything they do has a reason and they're doing it consciously, because they're probably not. So that little rambling example of that little trait of myself, I found out about because of shadow work that I've done over the last few years. You can also do shadow work on things that you are purposely ignoring about yourself that you are aware of, but you're trying to push it down and pretend it doesn't exist, and you just want to act like nothing's wrong. An example of that for me is sometimes I'll have an attitude when I shouldn't, and I'm told I have an attitude and I'm very aware of it, and sometimes I just pretend it doesn't exist, but it doesn't always work. So my attitude is something I consciously try to work on within shadow work. Okay, so what are some signs that you should maybe think about doing some shadow work? One of the things I mentioned was an attitude, but some other ones is you get angry about people or events, but you don't know why they make you mad. You have the inability to accept gifts or help from others. You have a tendency to be rude for no reason or have an attitude, and you have noticed a negative spike of emotion towards other people. You avoid certain people, places, or things and events that may trigger bad feelings or emotions, even if you are aware of them, but you continue to choose not to go to them just in the fear that something might happen. So that's kind of more of an anxiety thing. And I do experience anxiety as well, because it is a very different aspect than my attitude. Another one is you project your own fears onto others. That could be an example as if you are, say, maybe a parent or a guardian of someone, or you're in a relationship and there's something that scares you, but you try to prevent them from experiencing the same thing. So maybe you have a large fear of dogs because maybe you got bitten by a dog when you're younger. So now you will never allow your children to have a dog just because of your fear. You know that not all dogs are dangerous, especially if they are trained correctly, but you're projecting that fear onto the rest of your family, even though it may have happened a very long time ago. Some more obvious reasons why you could do some shadow work, but it depends on if you are going through treatment with a therapist or a doctor, is if you have depression or anxiety, which I have already mentioned because I have anxiety, or the fact that you rely on other people for most of your emotional needs, or that you need to be validated constantly just to get throughout your day. This is a list of possible reasons to do some shadow work just based on my own personality, but also aspects that I have personally seen in other people that I thought would be a good reason to do shadow work. There are definitely a lot more reasons that you could do some shadow work, but don't just take the list that I have and think that's it. Whatever's going on in your life, and if you feel like you can have some improvement of your own self, work on it no matter what it is. So, what are some results you might get from doing shadow work? For those who are able to successfully do some shadow work, there may be a sense of weight lifted off of their shoulders at some point. It might not fully solve the issues, but you just might feel a little better. You might feel more like yourself if you've gone through a period or like a fog, or you just haven't been quite the same as you were a couple weeks or months or even just a few days ago. Sometimes you go through a periodic fog every couple weeks or every couple days because there's just crazy things going on in life. Or you just might feel like you understand why you do things more now. You might not fully get rid of, going back to the example, your attitude, but you might have more control over it. You might not snap at people as often. Maybe it goes down to once a week instead of every day. But in general, you just want to have some sort of positive changes in yourself that you've seen. It could be a level of increased maturity that you've noticed, emotional growth, or personal acceptance and understanding. If you've really dug down into shadow work, you might have an increased level of creativity, of self-love and acceptance of your imperfections, improvements in relationships. You might allow yourself to accept help from others and not feeling like you have to do everything yourself. You are allowed to feel that love and get love and help from other people. It's okay. You might have increased levels of energy, because I know when I go through periods of anxiety, my levels of energy are horrible. I am exhausted, and sometimes it makes me feel physically ill. And when I feel like I am able to get through that funk, I feel a whole lot better. You might also experience spiritual development and more awareness of whatever your spirituality is. Everyone has a different path, just like every witch has a different path. So you might have been in a spiritual funk, and now you are having some sort of awakening. For some people who have gone through situations that involved other people, you might have noticed you are forgiving people. I'm not saying forget what they have done if they have wronged you, but you might forgive them a little bit, knowing that they aren't perfect, and you might let go of those grudges. But you also might be more forgiving of yourself, because sometimes we do things in our lives, we say things or we do things that we are not proud of, and you feel so bad about those things you have done. And sometimes you just need to forgive yourself and not put so much pressure, because you are not perfect. You are wonderful, but you aren't perfect, and none of us are, and none of us should have that expectation to be perfect. It is okay to be human. And in general, you might realize what you do and don't want within your life. Maybe you've had a year or so where you just didn't know what you're doing. You're in a funk, and there's a lot of things you didn't like that you're doing, but you just didn't know what to do. Taking the time to sit down to really get to know yourself, you might realize what you want to do with yourself, or have new goals that you would like to achieve. And with that, you might even start to let go of toxic thoughts that you have, or habits that no longer serve a purpose in your life. So even if shadow work doesn't fix all of your problems, because it's not going to solve situations that have already happened or very large problems, but it might be able to help you handle how you react to situations or how you're responding to a consistent situation, something that may be long term. Because a lot of what we go through in life is based on how we respond. And if we are able to have a better response than we did in the past, different outcomes may occur. But in the end, just having a sense of peace within yourself can help you in so many ways. But just remember, shadow work is to work on yourself and not fix others. But it can also help you understand other people and the choices they make, even if you don't agree with those choices. If those choices do not help you and are harmful, you should not feel like you need to involve yourself with those choices. And that is something you could possibly decide while you are doing your shadow work. Okay, so moving on. Is shadow work for everyone? No, it's not. Some don't like it, and some might not get results or the results that you want. Maybe they have different expectations of what shadow work is, and they try it, and they just don't like it. But I like it. I know other people like it, but everyone is slightly different. There are also a variety of reasons that people don't like shadow work. I've seen some jokes on social media that people just completely avoid shadow work in general, because a lot of people do encourage you to do it, and others are just straight up like, no, not going to do it. That may be because it brings up bad memories or traumas or other aspects about themselves that they don't want to confront yet. Some of these negative emotions may be from past personal choices and experiences, or from abusive relationships, if it's from romantic relationships or family relationships. And for one of the reasons that I made my disclosure early on in this episode is shadow work, I would assume, I don't know this for sure, but for those who have mental health issues or have experienced pretty severe traumas, doing shadow work may trigger an episode of intense emotions or have a form of a reaction that is from their mental illness or anxiety. If you would like to do shadow work and you feel like you can't do it alone, speak with someone who is aware of your situation, like family, friends, doctors, or therapists, and maybe they can guide you with it or just talk to you about what you would like to work on. Some examples of bad memories that people repress or have been negatively affected by but didn't maybe realize that it has as big of an impact on them is possibly from abuse or assault, physically or emotionally, drug use or alcohol use, death of a loved one, being in a traumatic accident or have had a near-death experience or have seen someone going through a death or a near-death experience. You might have been bullied as a child when you were younger or even as you got older. You could have gone through a sudden and unexpected breakup. I know that affects people. And you could just have past self-esteem issues in general. And there may have been choices that you regret, or you trusted the wrong people and now you have trust issues and it bothers you. So how often should you do shadow work? Do shadow work however often you think you should. You shouldn't have to wait until you feel like something is wrong. You can do shadow work on a daily, a weekly basis, whatever you feel like you are ready for, because you can't force yourself to do shadow work if you are not ready. Just like how I said shadow work is to work on you, and the reason other people don't want to do it is because they feel like they're forced to do shadow work. You cannot do something you are not ready to do and expect a good result. The next thing I have are some questions that you can ask yourself before you do shadow work. Since shadow work is pretty much interviewing yourself and getting to know your deepest, darkest, hidden secrets that you might not fully be aware of them, these are some questions that might help you prepare yourself. The first one is, why am I doing this? The next one is, what would I like the end results to be? Next one is there a risk I might think about something that I don't want to remember? Should I involve someone I trust while I go through this just in case I feel like I might get upset or it might affect my mental health? Am I willing to put the time into this? Will I use this time to grow or continue to make excuses for my current behavior just because it makes me uncomfortable? Do I realize that this is for my own benefit and not to fix others? Am I ready to grow spiritually and emotionally? Do I realize that I am not perfect and always will be a work in progress, even if I feel like I am at a good point in my life and have to let go of negative thoughts and feelings from my past? So that's a couple questions you can ask yourself. You can write those questions down if you like, or you could always re-reference this. But in general, ask yourself, are you ready? Are you ready for this? And if not, why are you not ready? What is holding you back? Is it because shadow works make you think about things that you don't like? Is it because it hurts you emotionally and you just want to just completely pretend it doesn't exist? Unfortunately, life is going to be hard. We're never going to have perfect periods of pure joy for our entirety of life. So you got to realize at some point that you're going to have to face these hard truths that life is tough and we need to work on ourselves to get through it. Otherwise, how are you going to get through life and be happy if you're just upset about everything in the past and let it bring you down? I know for those who do have mental health situations that do require some assistance, but for those who don't, why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you allowing your growth to be stagnant? Is it because you find it too hard or you just don't want to put the effort in? And I guarantee for some people, it's just because they're a little bit lazy. I know I'm lazy sometimes, but you don't want to be lazy about your entire self-development. Okay, so this is probably the section that people really want to hear. What are some ways that you can do shadow work? There's quite a few different ways, and I'm just going to list a few of them. If there are other ways that you find work better for you, go ahead and do them. You could go ahead and actually send me a message if you have something that's not on this list that you think is a very good shadow work technique, because I'd love to hear it. But I'm going to go over the things that I have done and also some other things that have kind of matched up on some research that I've done as well, just to kind of make sure I'm not giving you a bunch of baloney. So before you do some shadow work, I would suggest doing some grounding and centering yourself before you do the shadow work, just to make sure that you're in a calm state of mind, at least in the beginning, to help prepare yourself for possible bursts of emotion and energy, depending on the results you might be getting or what you are currently working on in your shadow work. You can keep your notes, or you can just talk to yourself out loud and take notes, or you can just write to yourself in a journal just like you would as a normal diary. Note down your thoughts, any questions you have for later, answers you have gotten from yourself, and any progress that you may have made over time. Shadow work isn't going to solve your problems within one session. It could take many, many, many sessions. One of the things that you can do is to meditate and think about who you are and start asking yourself these questions that you're writing down or that you have in your mind. Almost like interviewing yourself, which I have mentioned, and record the details in your notebook. Be honest with yourself. Don't pretend that you aren't upset about things of your past or your current situations and behaviors. Allow yourself to feel everything that you need to feel. Accept the past as the past and accepting the mistakes that you have made, and tell yourself that you are willing to grow and learn from the past. You can make lists. You can make lists of what you think are your good qualities and your bad qualities. What do you want to work on? What do you do that you do or don't like? Is it compulsive, or do you choose to act the way you do? You can also write yourself some positive reminders. You can make your own mantra that you can repeat to yourself when you feel that your spirits are low. Mind over matter. Over time, if you aren't mean to yourself, even if it's just internally, I know I've heard some people just call themselves stupid whenever they make a mistake, or just things that are just not very nice to tell yourself. Try to switch up that mindset and tell yourself words of positivity, and it could possibly change your thought process. You can also record your dreams. I've been recording dreams or trying to interpret my dreams since I was 14. A lot of the time your dreams will try to tell you something. It will give you signs or symbols or repeat events that have happened, or it could completely make up a new situation, but it tends to be a consistent thing that you dream about, and it might make you feel a certain way. So it's your job to listen to your dreams and figure out what it means. It could be your brain is trying to tell you something about yourself. You could also find some self-help or self-development books that you want to read. I don't have a list of those because I know those are something that's very particular to the person. So if you find a book that you like, go ahead and read it. Even if it's just a few pages at a time, or you read the whole book in one sitting in a day. Just something that might make you feel good and think about things. And this might tie in a little bit with your list, but identify bad habits that you may have had, such as unhealthy eating, drugs, excessive drinking, toxic friendships, and try to let go of those things that prevent you from progressing in your life. You use them to possibly negatively cope and or ignore your emotions and actions. Whatever it is, get rid of those things that harm you and don't make you a better version of yourself. The last one I have is to spend some time alone. You don't always have to force yourself to be around other people. Give yourself a day, a weekend, or a week of your choice just to hang out by yourself. Sometimes we use other people to distract ourselves from ourselves. So try to find a little bit of peace in solitude. It doesn't have to be long periods of time. You can still get online or social media, but for some people, even cutting that out can help them just reconnect with themselves and not feel those external pressures. So that's pretty much all the information I have for you on shadow work. The only other thing I can go over is why I do shadow work. I know I do shadow work because I'm snippy, I get sharp, and I want to try to control my attitude as much as possible. I also tend to like things my way, and I would prefer to have as much control over what goes on around me as possible, but I need to try to break that habit because it's almost impossible to have full control of everything that goes on. I have issues trusting people sometimes, and I need to learn not to show how untrusting I am on my face. Sometimes my facial expressions or my behavior may be a little too forward or up front because I personally don't think you should trust people immediately. Trust is something that is earned, not given out freely. But sometimes I make it a little too obvious, and I need to get better at looking a little more peaceful. I do have anxiety. I was diagnosed with it in my 20s. It's something that I had my entire life, and I had no idea. So I try to pinpoint what causes those anxieties and try to just be very aware of it. And once I'm aware of a situation that does trigger my anxiety, because sometimes my episodes can get not fun. Sometimes I get sick, like actually vomit, or I have muscle spasms and I can't stand up straight for days at a time because my back is in so much pain. I'll reject food, like my body physically will reject food, and even if I don't get sick, it's almost hard to swallow food. So doing the shadow work and noticing what triggers them makes it a lot easier, because sometimes I can completely avoid having a full panic attack, anxiety attack. It's not a fun situation. So every time I have a new one, I try to really dig down and figure out why. I've also mentioned that I like to interpret my dreams because I do tend to know that there are symbols that I have noticed, and it has actually helped me in the past to discover things about myself or situations that I'm going through that I wasn't paying attention and I need to pay attention to, either about people or just other things going on in my life, and it has helped me out. I'll also do shadow work when I have an argument with someone and that I don't understand where they're coming from. I will try to understand where they're coming from on my own time and see if maybe I was the one who was wrong. Because I know, even though I don't always want to admit it while I'm in a conversation or an argument, that I could have been completely wrong, and to prevent that from happening next time, I need to understand other people. And just right there, those are just some of the big things that I like to do shadow work for, because I'm not perfect. I do go through ups and downs, and I notice myself getting into bad habits again when I don't pay attention, or I get too comfortable. You don't always want to get too comfortable because then you get into those bad habits again sometimes. They don't always fully go away. You are more aware when you are actually paying attention. So that's really all I have for you. Just remember that you are worth every single bit of work you can put into yourself. Inner peace is something that you can achieve if you allow yourself to achieve it. You are worth the work and becoming the best version of yourself. There will always be aspects of yourself that you may need to work on in your life because as we get older, different experiences may cause a little bit of that damage that we go through, and we just need to always progress and not let something new hold us back. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode, and I don't know if enjoy is the right word because doing shadow work can be fun. I find it fun, but for some people it is an intense journey, an intense internal journey. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to send me a message on some of the social media pages, on Instagram at catsteaandwitchcraft. Catsteaandwitchcraft. On Twitter, it is catsteaandwitch. You can send me an email at catsteaandwitchcraftpodcast@gmail.com. I appreciate every single one of you for being here. This is turning into over a 30-minute episode, but I will see you guys next week, and have a good rest of your next couple days. Blessed be.